All right. I think we are live and I think we are good. Uh, Good to see everyone today. Um, Last night I was thinking about putting out a post about Mental Health Awareness Month, and I was having a lot of difficulty. And the reason I was having a lot of difficulty is that I don't like that there's a month called Mental Health Awareness Month. For 4 years, I've been on this platform preaching mental health. I've combated things like fad terms, like what I originally considered imposter syndrome before meeting Dr. Lisa and Richard Orbe Austin. So then when it comes to this month, it was like, well, we've been talking about how we need to normalize these conversations, and they start from a very, very, very early age. So it goes back to the entire idea of Black history is American history. We should be celebrating all the time. Why are we uh, sitting in this place where it's isolated, where it's I mean, where we start talking about it, and then all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of posts about it, and it's like, well, where is everything the other 11 months out of the year? So then I was supposed to meet with somebody today at this time, and then they wound up having to change. I'm like, okay, well, I was going to do a video on it because I'd rather speak to the video, and just decided to do a live and I could post later. First, I want to get used to celebrating my own accomplishments. It's now day 8 or I think day nine of my diet and workout. Um, I don't expect anybody to notice right away, but I'm keeping at about 2,000 calories per day. Right after this, I'm going on to my Peloton and going to be working out for a while. So let's talk about mental health awareness. First and foremost, if you haven't spoken to me, if you haven't heard from me, if this is your first time tuning in, I've been dealing with mental health struggles my entire life. Um, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I started acting out, started having major issues. Uh, and around 5, my parents started testing me. Now, this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. Um, and eventually it was discovered that I had ADHD before the ADHD fad got popular. I also have something called language processing disorder, which is when I know what I'm trying to say up here, but it doesn't always come out this way. So because I wasn't always connecting what's up here to up to out here, it wound up creating a ton of issues. I wound up getting bullied quite a bit. One of my most vivid memories is sitting at a family gathering, and it was my uncle's birthday, and he everybody was making turns to make a speech, and my uncle is like super smart, 1600 SAT smart. I think it's still at a 1600 now. I'm kind of out of the loop. And basically, what I was trying to say was that I really appreciate because it's hard for me to get on his level. And I forget what came out, but I remember the laughter from my family afterwards. And it stood in the back of my mind. And then I never was able to maintain friends, and the bullying continued. And I started getting anxiety and depression. I started having anger. I wanted to make my mom happy because she was working with me nonstop. But I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I would go through tutoring sessions and I would get something 1 second, then it was immediately gone the next. And I knew I had the potential, but it was never able to come through. And then high school hit, barely passed. I think I wound up with a C- average, maybe D plus. Barely got into college. The college program I got into was for people that were kind of right at the border. And I got in, and it was my first time on my own. I'm going to be very honest with you. I basically was lying to fit in. I would make up these innocuous stories about myself so I presented better than I actually was because I wanted to be accepted. Those people I was surrounding myself with found out, and then it brought on a level of bullying that I don't talk about very often. It brought on bullying where I would have my next door neighbors banging on my door at all hours of the night, not allowing me to sleep. When I was in the bathroom, using the restroom, I would have things thrown in my stall, like buckets of water. When I was taking a shower, people would throw stuff in it. Like, it was bad. It was so bad that I wound up hiding in my friend's suite upstairs from me in college. Um, they basically had a third roommate, and yeah, I'll always be grateful to those two individuals for kind of saving me. But I wound up failing out of school, and I had to fight to get back in. And at that point, I found journalism, and it wasn't because I wanted to go into journalism. It was what I was best at, and wound up raising my GPA to a 3.0 in my major, created the Gender Studies Club. Even though I'll be very honest, there was a level of me being a little bit homophobic because I wasn't really brought up in an environment that was super diverse. But it was an awakening and awareness for me, and then even kind of escalating throughout. Still dealt with it. I deal with severe depression currently, and I'm not talking about. I'm not recommending anybody take medication, but personally, I use medication for anxiety, as well as my ADHD, and I had gone off of it for about 10 years from time up. Well, more than that. I went off medication when I was 21 because I wanted to prove I could do this on my own. Until I found out we were pregnant with twins. At which point I said I had to come to a decision of, is my ADHD actually an impediment, or do I deserve to allow myself to be my best self? And it was at that moment I decided to go back on meds, and I'm very, very happy that I did. Although I'll tell you something about the California medical system, and I was told this directly by their doctors. The tests that they take for ADHD are not correlated to ADHD. They're general tests, and the objective, I quote, was for people to fail so they didn't have to put as many people on medication. And that was a big issue. Now, in addition, I go through Kaiser. Now, Kaiser Permanente is a HMO out here, and if you want to go to a therapist, it's social workers. It didn't really set well with me, so even during the process of wanting to go to therapy and whatnot, it really didn't work out in my benefit. And I bring this all up to kind of give everybody a timeline and guidance, because it's great. I was really happy when I decided to open up and be myself when I first came on these platforms 4 years ago and talk about things. But here's the crux of really what I'm getting at for this conversation, and then I'm going to bring in an overlay that's going to kind of show people what I'm talking about. But there's a difference between mental health awareness and mental health resolution. Respectfully, in my opinion, there is no mental health resolution. You can't go in and say, oh, I'm going to fix this. All you can do is create an awareness about it and create a sense of normalcy so people could have the conversations that they need, that they could be open about the things that they go through and the things that they went through, in the hopes that it makes them feel a bit better about themselves. But it's not a fix. And while it took me a long time to consider ADHD my superpower, and it is, that doesn't mean that even those that have the best outlooks, the best reframing of what they're going through, don't suffer. So we really need to provide those support structures and put them in place in order for people to have that comfort level. And this is why I had such a hard time when people started using imposter syndrome 2 years ago, because they weren't saying it with an understanding of what imposter syndrome actually is, what imposter syndrome actually stands for, and how it's relevant to people's lives. Instead, they were going off of this definition that was really curated by the advent of social audio, by the advent of what was going on in the world in the very beginning stages of the pandemic. And that's not okay. That's why I fought so hard to say, okay, well, this is actually inferiority complex that we deal with from a very early age. Now, again, Dr. Lisa and Richard Orbe Austin showed me what it's like to talk about these things responsibly, and my opinion changed. So now I have a better understanding of those, but the entire thought process behind it is let's talk about this from all the way along. The other thing that I want to bring up, and I'm going to move myself over here. Hi, Ecam fam. So I wanted to share this particular chart with everybody. Now, this is with ADHD, but it's not, it's relatable to everything. So when somebody has a mental health disorder, and by the way, depression, anxiety are part of the Americans with Disability Acts. I can't speak on an international basis because I don't know laws. But when people deal with one mental health disorder, there's something called I'm going too fast. Comorbidities. What a comorbidity is a concurrent condition that you also deal with. So look at it this way. If you are prone to anxiety, then that anxiety is going to have side effects. And I don't mean side effects like you get bloated when you take Augmentin. No, what I mean by side effects is by having anxiety, you may develop OCD. By having depression, you may develop an anxiety. By having ADHD, there's other things that go along with it that really bring it together. So when people talk about these mental health awareness, there needs to be an awareness that when you're talking to somebody that has been open about the fact that they do have a mental health condition, it's oftentimes more than just one thing. I mentioned in the very beginning I'm ADHD. Well, I also have sleep disorder. I have sleep apnea. I also have insomnia. I have learning disabilities, which is the ADHD, but there's also secondary disabilities. Mood disorders, I honestly don't know the definition of, so I'd have to look into it. I never dealt with substance abuse disorders. I knew very early on that when I was in high school, I started developing OCD tendencies. And when I started developing OCD tendencies, like I would have to touch something multiple times. And I would have to reread a paragraph multiple times. And I was able to break myself of that. But the reason I bring that up is because at that moment, I realized I had a sort of addictive personality. So I forced myself to really stay away from all these other things that could possibly come into play with the substance abuse. I don't drink very much, especially as I've gotten older. Now it's all about red wine. So that was never a factor. I have anxiety disorders, intellectual disability. I'm not really sure. Impulse control personality disorder. I don't know the definition of this. What I do know is that there's, with ADHD, it was once described to me as the lack of a action, pause, reaction. So if you're removing that pause from the equation, I wonder if that's considered impulse control personality disorder or what actually constitutes. Feel free to chime in, but I will go and be looking that up directly after so that I have an awareness of it. Because I really put this together sort of on the fly. So when you're dealing with comorbidities, what it winds up leading to, and again, this is from the people I've spoken to, is it's sort of, this is where a lot of people say it's almost you against the world because you don't feel like you're just battling one thing. Let me give you an example. So I go to sleep. Every 2 hours I wake up. I have my CPAP on, which is, even after 10 years of using it, is not the most comfortable thing. I wake up tired. my exhaustion exacerbates my ADHD. So now I'm facing impulse control. My mood is not what it needs to be. My LD, so my learning disabilities, are heightened because of it. Now, so just starting the day, I'm already in a place of challenge. Now I know I have an interview. I have something going on throughout the course of the day. So now my anxiety kicks in. See how this is ramping up? While people talk about medication as a way to help, the reality is there's things that we can do to lessen the impact, but they never go away. It's just the reality of the situation. What we deal with as a society is we're a society of coping, or we're a society of reframing it, and that's the best that we could do under the given situations. But nothing is ever going to take away all these different things. And there's so many people, everybody sits and says, well, hey, try this, try that, try that. Dude, not everybody can do yoga. Not everybody can meditate. I would, exercising was one of my favorite things to do to help with what I deal with. But 12 years ago, I got into a bad car accident. My metabolism slowed down. I have herniations L4, L5, as well as my neck. I have no meniscus in my left knee, and I had bursitis in my left shoulder. Oh, and by the way, I have 10 concussions. And that's not trying to make one thing sound worse than the other. But my point is that that even those things that we can rely on early on don't have can sometimes change, and often do change over time. Even something like eating, as I've discussed in a post recently, um, I I have an eating disorder. I'm an overeater. When I get stressed, I immediately go to food. It was always carbs. It was always sugar. But then what happens when my metabolism goes down as I get older? My metabolism goes down. My bad habits now suddenly appear. Now there's these additional things on top of what I was already dealing with, that I now have new challenges that I have to face. Which leads to body dysmorphia. I do not have a mirror in my office, even though this is also my studio. And that's for a very pointed reason. I don't want to see a mirror, because the second I see a mirror, it's going to be like, oh shit, I better leave. So these are the challenges. And this is exactly the reason that we have to start talking about this from very early on. So when we talk about Mental Health Awareness Month, it's great. I have no issue with those that want to post all the different hotlines. I have no issue with those that want to talk about these different attributes. But the key is not in the monthly focus. It's in the long-term implementation. It starts with the parents that realize that it's okay to be vulnerable around their kids. It's okay to talk to their kids about what they're dealing with. And it starts early. The second, kids are so impressionable, the second you create a barrier between you and them, that barrier carries over in their mind. So let's just say, so my children are 3. So let's say that my daughter, let's say I get into a really bad accident. I'm in a massive amount of pain. My daughter says to me, "What's wrong?" My response, "I'm fine. I'm going to tough it out. Walk it off." You know what happens there? Now it's imprinted in their mind that daddy's tough. Daddy toughs it out. So now she has to too. Instead, at 3 years old, daddy gets hurt. "Hey, daddy, you okay?" "Not really." I'm in a lot of pain. This is what happened, but it's okay. I'll be okay. Daddy will be okay. And then once I'm up and about, then we have that conversation. Hey, if you get hurt, it's okay to be in pain. It's okay to cry. It's okay uh, to not feel your best all the time. And that from that early stage, that's what makes it okay as she becomes a preteen and then a teen and then an adult. I don't know where this macho man mentality came from, but it's not good for anyone. So that's where we start. We have to start from that early age. And that's where this entire thing comes into play. So, I'm going to close out in a second because I know, I do want to go on the Peloton before I lose my nerve for it, because it is a forced thing still instead of a natural thing, and I have some work to do. But when we talk about Mental Health Awareness Month, all I ask is for an awareness that we never know what people are dealing with. And often when people are dealing with something, they're dealing with multiple things. You just don't know how those things are going to come into play with each other. It is a really, really, really difficult thing when you're talking to somebody that you know to be your friend and they snap at you, or they brush you off, or they ignore you. Because as humans, it's ingrained in us that if somebody brushes us off, it must be something we did. That's not always the case. Sometimes we just are in so much pain that we don't know how to speak to it, that we don't know how to elaborate on it, we don't know how to be open about it. So we shut down. And the objective is not to ignore that person that shuts down. The objective is to simply let them know that you're there. At the end of the day, when we talk about mental health, it is never about you. It is always about them. Took a long time to learn that. But here we are. So listen, you could see that I'm on the set of Healing Our Future. Normally when I come on and do a live, I wouldn't do that. But for Mental Health Awareness Month, I felt it was important to. Because this is about healing our future. So if you want to continue to heal, reach out to a friend. Keep the word going. Do monthly check-ins. Don't leave it for 30 days out of 365. It's only going to hurt you. Until next time, which happens to be tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, I will see you later. And for all those suffering, for all of those being challenged in the everyday, as corny and redundant as it sounds, please know you're not alone.